Mai haere mai ki te kaunihiro no Rotorua. Good afternoon, councillors, and welcome to the council meeting for today, 11 June. This is our second meeting for the day, but it is a separate meeting, so we'll follow the usual protocol. So just checking you've got your phones off and away. Meeting has been live streamed. I'll explain how we'll take this meeting shortly, but if we get underway with a karakia from Councillor Patterson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Patterson. The call for apologies, I actually have who wish it now online. I do have an apology from Councillor Kiriopa. I have a mover and a seconder to receive the apologies. Thank you, Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, that is carried. Declarations of interest for, thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The LAP discussion, I hold a non-licence and I'll remove myself from the on-licence conversation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. I will note that and just remind me again when we get to that part of the meeting, Councillor Patterson.
Madam Chair, I do have a prior engagement at 4 o'clock, so if we don't finish before then, I'll have to take my leave.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We'll endeavour to do our best to finish by 4 p.m.
Madam Chair, and also just noting that Councillor Brown and I, with the museum funding discussion later on, with the Rotorua Trust involvement, Councillor Brown and I have not had any input into the Rotorua Trust decision, so we'll stay at the table for that decision making.
Sorry, you'll stay. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Wang. Just explaining before I start this meeting formally, so we have a council meeting, but we also have hearings for the local water done well process. So the people that were coming to submit have been asked to come at 2 p.m. We're just not certain at the moment if they will all turn up. So what we'll do is we'll start the council meeting. If people attend for the hearings, then we will stop the council meeting. We'll do the hearings and then we'll resume the council meeting. Given that I'm not sure around the timing of everything, I think we'll just leave the order of the agenda as it is, and we'll just stop if we need to. So I don't have any urgent items. There should be no minor matters that have been notified to me.
I have a minor matter, Madam Chair.
Councillor Lee.
It concerns the information elected members were provided in relation to the section of land that councillors made a decision to gift last week. Elected members were told that the cost of maintenance of that section was $8,000. I have an awful lot of volunteers on my Facebook page that would like to mow lawns for council at that rate, because it works out, if that lawn is mowed fortnightly, that would be $306 per mow, and I understand a normal property of that size would typically be cost in the vicinity of $50 to $80. So I was wondering if that was an error, or are our mowing
Councillor Lee, I think
excessive?
We'll get the CE to provide a response to offline. There may be other maintenance and upkeep on that reserve as well. So that's a minor matter. I'll get you to take that offline with the CE and for him to provide a response on that to you. So I'm going to move on now with the agenda. We've got the minutes of the council meeting held on the 28th of May. So I haven't got my page numbers, sorry. Thank you. It's only the correctness of the minutes. I've had it moved that the minutes are true and correct. Is there a seconder for the minutes of the 28th of May? Thank you, Councillor Barker. If there are no corrections, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. There is no public forum. There is no public petitions. Moving on now to a notice of motion by Councillor Brown. So Councillor Brown will ask you to speak to your notice of motion, which has been circulated and is up there on the screen. I'll get Councillor Brown just to talk to it first before I take a mover and a seconder.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I put this to Council to leave the door open for us to revisit the uptake of the sewerage system. The cut-off is the 25th of this month, and I think it's prudent for us to examine the uptake, and if the uptake is less than satisfactory in our view, that we then revisit the funding alternatives for that scheme. Also, I'm aware that the CE is in discussion with terms of a loan potentially with Regional Council, and that may have an effect on the cost of that to the residents. So I'm not asking for us to make a decision today on the quantum. I'm just asking that we leave the door open to revisit this and decide whether we are happy with the uptake of the scheme by residents.
So are there any questions to Councillor Brown around this? Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just let you know that I'm happy to second the motion. I think it's an excellent initiative. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
I think Councillor Wairau has also indicated that as well. Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are doing questions, was that?
Yes, were questions around the motion before I...
could I just ask about the wording to Councillor Brown, that the Council direct the CE to report back to the next Council meeting, which, forgive me, will be the June forgive me, the date, I think, is the...
25th of June.
Which is the same date as this final day for sign-up, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So, sorry, how accurate are those numbers going to be? Is the CE happy, comfortable, first of all, that he can provide that number?
I think that's to you.
All my questions are good.
Councillor O'Brien, I haven't anticipated your decision around this notice of motion. Were the notice of motion to pass, I would need to consider whether the scheduling of the 25th of June council meeting is appropriate, or whether that topic can be covered at a different time. So I would need to consider that should this motion pass.
Thank you. So, because of that date, you be considering maybe moving our meeting?
Councillor O'Brien, I don't have the opportunity to move the cut-off date for the residents to sign up. That was in a council resolution.
Sorry, I'm talking about the meeting date. Apologies, sorry.
That's right. So the only date I could then shift is potentially the council meeting date.
Okay, thank you. The second part is to report back to the next council meeting the resident uptake of stage 2 in consideration of a number of property owners who have agreed to connect to the scheme. Could I just ask, so the part that says in consideration onwards, are you saying you want to see if it's a particular percentage of? I'm just not quite sure what the wording is trying to achieve here. As in, you just want a number?
Councillor Brown, it's your motion.
I'm just looking for direction from the Chair. If it's my question to answer, I'm happy to do that. I don't know what that number is. I think that's part of the conversation for us to look at. I don't want to put it, I didn't specifically put a hard number on there. I don't know what councillors feel is an appropriate amount of uptake to for success.
Forgive me, Madam Chair, maybe I'm not pinpointing this accurately enough, my apologies. I'm just concerned that what the direction to me reads is we're telling the Chief Executive to come back with what the number is that people have signed up. And is that all we're asking? That's it? Or are you then asking for a reconsideration of what we've previously talked about based on that number?
Through you, Madam Chair.
So are you just asking if the CE is going to report back with the number of people that have signed up?
Well, that's how the motion reads to me, Madam Chair. Maybe I'm in the minority, but...
I think that's pretty clear on the wording there.
So is that all Councillor Brown wants? just to know what the number is.
Well, I think we can't predict something. We've only got this motion here as it is, so...
Yeah, forgive me, sorry, I'm not really sure what the outcome or the desirability of what the actual motion is, just to find out the number of which we would have been told anyway. I'm not quite sure. And that's just why I'm clarifying if I've missed something. But if it's just a number he wants, I'll be happy to support. That's fine. Yeah, basically, as long as the CE is comfortable that we may have to change the date to accommodate staff. And if Councillor Brown's happy with that, I'll be happy. So, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions to Councillor Brown on this? If not, I've had, and Councillor Brown will move that. Councillor Warrior, you indicated that you would second that. So, Councillor Brown, you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I've outlined it already, but I think to answer Councillor O'Brien's question, ultimately, potentially there is a need if the uptake is poor, and that's the report that we get back. We may need to revisit the decision, but that's not what that says. I'm leaving the door open for us to understand the consequences of the decision in the letter that went out. So I think it's pretty straightforward. The door's open for us to receive a report on the uptake, and we can decide where to go from there.
Councillor Waru as a seconder. Anyone else wish to make a comment on this? Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it's a question for the Chief Executive.
We're in comments rather than questions now.
Well, Councillor Brown mentioned that the Regional Council are considering or reconsidering the terms of their loan that they had previously offered to us. If something significant had changed, would that give us an opportunity to reconsider the Tarawera rating arrangements?
I think that's just your comment, so we'll just take it as a comment. We've had the motion moved and seconded. I'm now in comments, so I have a comment from Her Worship the Mayor online.
Thank you very much. And just a brief comment from myself. I am happy to support the notice of motion because I want to ensure that we have all of the information available at the time to make a decision. But I did just want to be quite clear that at this stage, I hope that that it isn't implied that if there isn't enough people signed up, that there will be additional support. I know that there are certainly, we're all aware that there are some in the Tarawera community that have been advocating for people not to sign up, and we have tried our best to inform people of the consequences of that, including significant additional costs in needing to sign up themselves. So I just want to be clear that the preferred option and what we are strongly encouraging people to do is to ensure that if you're a Lake Tarawera resident impacted, that you do sign up before that 25th date. However, I am happy to support this notice of motion of Councillor Brown's. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Brown, for your notice of motion. I think it's a lot more clearer to me now. And as long as it's, I want to say that I thought that our Chief Executive Officer and the Mayor did a good presentation last time to Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and I hope now that the negotiations that will be going on will be better than the way we were treated after that particular one. Can I ask on something that came up, I think Councillor Conan said?
We're in comments now, not questions.
Oh, are we? Oh, well.
So you can finish your commentary if you so wish.
I was just going to ask, were you talking about a changing of a date at the end of this month or something, possibly for the full council meeting?
I think the Chief Executive had answered that, Councillor Maxwell. He had answered that, yes, that's something that he could potentially look at, but obviously we're not predicating any future decision around this at the moment.
The reason I ask is that I'm going to have a problem being at the full council meeting the end of the month because I'll be probably up in the air. But if the date has changed, well, I'm going to be pleased. Kia ora.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, we've had 3 speakers in favour of the motion. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against the motion? If not, I'm now going to put that motion. All those in favour, please signal aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. Thank you. Well, we don't have any presentations. We'll move past the hearings because I'll come back to that. Councillors, now on page 22 of your agenda, since we've just skipped over a few pages. Just get to that page. So we're going to move on to the Rotorua Museum Te Whare Taonga o Te Aroa reopening, options and funding. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Thank you, Councillor Barker and Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. And welcome Alex and Will, who are going to speak to the presentation.
Kia ora, Madam Chair and councillors. Will step through the presentation in front of you, and there is quite a lot of content I recognise that we'll be stepping through, but as a brief introduction, I really just wanted to sort of set the scene with the 3 main themes associated with the report. The first part of the report relates to concept design, so we're seeking council to accept the recommendations of the PSG for that concept design work, and that follows on from the report we provided in May and the subsequent meetings with councillors to walk through the design elements of the remaining zones. Part 2 of the paper relates to funding, and we are seeking funding to move into the developed design phase, with a council contribution requested of $181,700 in CAPEX funding. Importantly, I think to note that contribution, that 181 contribution, secures $661,700 of external funding we have raised for exhibition design so far, but also mitigates a risk of a potential repayment of $17.1 million in construction funding that's tagged to a fully operational museum. A decision on progressing to develop design also provides us with a stronger fundraising platform so that staff can continue to fundraise for the museum as per the direction of this council. The next design stage is also critical in defining actual costs for the exhibition, so that the decision today will help us secure the existing design contractor, which is also a risk we've highlighted in previous reports. We are working to a financial cap, so while we're requesting a CAPEX contribution of $181,700, I, in discussions with the Chief Executive, will ensure that we have an offset across operational expenditure in my group to stay within that cap. The third part of the report, while we haven't sought a decision around that, is provided so that councillors can see and provide comment and direction on a range of museum opening scenarios. We are really conscious that councillors have been interested in our planning and have wanted to understand the options available for opening a museum given our financial constraints. So here we've provided an early view of a range of scenarios that cover a full, staged and paused museum attraction. This portion of the report also touches on the layout of the cafe, retail and ticketing, which has been a point of interest for councillors, with summarised findings of the independent review from our first retail group included. Our intention is to keep developing these options with a view of to obtaining decisions from council later this year, so late 2025 or early 2026, where we have a higher degree of certainty around costs, both of costs and funding, both with the build program but also with exhibition design. So with that, I'll hand over to Will. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou. Following damages from the Kaikoura earthquake in 2016, the museum was closed and then subsequently the tonga and objects were removed to ensure their safety. At that stage, the project was predominantly focused on earthquake strengthening, or seismic strengthening of the building. And as we've progressed through the part I was asked around what do we put back from an exhibition and operational perspective, and the project has evolved into the Rotorua Museum Reopening Program, which has 3 different areas. So it's structured around construction, exhibition development and reopening strategy, and they all combine to deliver the agreed outcomes, which are commemorating and celebrating our Rotorua identity, enabling our Centre of Excellence in Te Arawa storytelling, to provide a safe home with a contemporary display space for the artefacts and tonga for which Council is kaitiaki, and to optimise access to New Zealand's heritage bathhouse. Alex went through this earlier, so I'll move on from this slide. So pre the closure in November 2016, the layout is as you see above. The new building layout is predominantly based on this with a few slight changes. So in the Zone 2, which is at the southern end of the atrium, we have a lift shaft and a plant room, and this enables accessible access through the majority of the building, which we previously did not have. In Zone 4, which is north of the entrance foyer, where we previously had the cinema and shaking theatre, that has been removed and is being replaced with a larger toilet block, as before we were under capacity in the ablutions perspective, and a discovery space. At this stage, the basement access, which we had before, is out of scope of the project. So the design process commenced with Council confirming the contractor Workshop E in December 2022. The first 2 design stages which we've been through are the master plan and the concept design, which are complete. The following design stages we need to undertake to complete the exhibition design are the developed design, followed by the detailed design, and then the production and installation, and then we close out the project and the museum can be opened. In July 2024, Workshop E presented a 90% concept to Council, and in September that year, on completion of 100% design, further work on the exhibition project was paused while we looked to secure funding and establish a project steering group. So in March this year, a PSG was set up, which includes councillors and external members. The 3 external members are 2 museum exhibition specialists, one of which is here today, and a rep from Te Pukenga or Koeki, which is the representatives from Te Arawa, Hapu and Whānau on matters relating to the Rotorua Museum. Over the past 6 months, we've spent a lot of time reviewing the design, and the PSG support the concept design and moving forward into the out design with Workshop E. We've had quite a lot of feedback through this process, and it's been collated and will form the next stage of design. The sort of key areas of this feedback is around ensuring all sectors of a community can see themselves represented within the exhibition, adjustments to a couple of the exhibition layouts to ensure that we better tell these stories, ensuring the galleries are well lit and the displays are not too dark, and ensuring we have fully considered visitor connection and circulation between exhibition and commercial offerings within the museum. So as Alex mentioned, to date we have raised just over $1 million for that exhibition design. To get to the end of developed design phase, we are looking at just over $1.4 million. So there is a $363,400 shortfall. With a lot of the funding that we have raised, $661,000 of it is dependent on us moving into the developed design, and $140,000 of that is time-bound and needs to be handed back between July and October. Apologies, we have August on the slide. This year, if no exhibition progress is made. We have a further $800,000 of funding with an estimate which is dependent on the sale of an asset, and which could be assist with funding further design and implementation, but we're looking at confirming that through this year. So with the $363,000 gap, we have a proposal from the Rotorua Trust to match fund that with a grant. So Council would match fund $181,700. The 2 conditions of a grant is that we must commence into develop design to be able to activate this, and the second is that if the exhibition project completes with contingency, then any remaining contingency must be used to pay back that grant. If that is not achievable, only partially achievable, then there's a clause in the grant for it to be written off and not have to be paid back. It's really important for us to meet developed design from a financial standpoint to meet the funding conditions detailed on the screen. But it also helps with mitigating a handful of risks which we have in the project. Predominantly, project costs are at a very estimated level, so we're sort of plus 30%, minus 10% at the moment until we can have more detailed design and work with installers to get more firmed up costs. We have a risk around our current consultants being on pause for the best part of a year and needing to move on to work, and risks around potentially needing to change contractors. It also assists us with seeking further funding, because it would show that council was making commitment and progress in it, but also once you have a design that you've committed to through this concept design process, it helps with shopping around rather than having a dream. One of the big impacts of a decision around council to fund the $181,700, which could be completed through additional capex borrowings, is it shifts the project from being 100% externally funded, which is how the exhibition project is funded through the LTP. The $181,000 represents 1.9% of the total expected capex expenditure of the project and 22% of the developed design phase. Given uncertainty around exhibition funding, like we're not in a stage at the moment in a position to confirm a reopening approach as we don't have the funding. So what we wanted to do today was to provide some reopening scenarios to council to give you a better understanding of how the museum could be reopened depending on where we land from a financial perspective. So the full reopening is per the complete design, and we'll have a look at what that looks like in a minute. We have two staged openings where scenario A is opening the central and southern portion of the buildings, and scenario B is opening the central and northern portions of the building. And then the third option is pausing the reopening indefinitely, so not reopening a museum. There's a graph on the right which doesn't give you dollars but shows you the level of effort and potential cost to complete each of those openings for the stage one of that opening. So full reopening would be 100% effort. The stage scenario A is around 85%. Stage scenario B is around 30-35%, and then the do nothing is the design costs, which is between 15 and 20%. So as the program progresses, and really predominantly dependent on the funding, we'll start to work out which of these scenarios is the most realistic. And while the full option gives the most benefit and will likely be the cheapest overall cost because you can do all the work in one go, it is only possible if we have funding. Hence the other options have been given. So the full option is essentially how the museum was open before, with the changes before, and it meets the project objectives and the funding criteria. The south wing here would open up the ground floor, so it would essentially be the full long-term exhibition design, and what would be open in the second stage would be the northern wing, so that's the historic bathhouse display, the attic and viewing platform in the north wing, and then also the short-term galleries. So there would need to be consideration with this scenario as to whether or not we have some space for temporary exhibitions in the permanent area, or we open the permanent exhibition and then as we find further funding we can open up space for temporary exhibitions. The final stage would be opening up level 1 in the ground floor. So such as with the scenario A of the stage scenarios, we would open up the central area foyer and then the north wing. And so here we would have the permanent historic exhibition with the bathhouse, and then we would also have the short-term gallery. And there'll need to be some consideration of what stories were we going to be telling in the long-term permanent exhibition that we might need to be covering off in the short-term exhibition. And once again, same as before, stage 3 is opening level 1 of ground floor of the south wing. So next few slides you'll see a few timeframes, and I really need to stress that these are very estimated timeframes at this stage, because at this stage we don't have dates for recommencements, and all the timeframes are subject to securing external fundings. So dates assume no barrier to achieving that through fundraising requirements. The timeframes have been pushed out slightly, so can potentially be tightened and refined as the design progresses. This full option would see the full museum opening in mid-2028, which is a year later than the initial assumed museum reopening of mid to late 2027. Stage scenario A, which is the central and south wing ground floor first, would result in a slightly earlier opening, given we're not doing the full extent of exhibition work, and we think that we can achieve that 3 months earlier than the full option, and so we would be opening in March 2028. And then phase 2 and 3 of that scenario would be dependent on funding, but we should be able to open within 9 months of getting funding for each of those stages. Stage scenario B is much shorter because we have a lot less workload, which you could see in the perceived effort graph on the earlier slide. And so it is likely we could open the museum around April 2027, but we would, due to the further effort being in phases 2 and phase 3, we would require additional time, like as we move through. So you'd be looking at about a year and a half to open up phase 2, and 9 to 12 months to open up phase 3 once we get funding achieved for those phases. Operationally, the museum has historically run at a cost to council, and that's standard across the sector. Operating the museum building has 3 separate main cost considerations, which will still require levels of funding if reopening is paused. So they are OPEX and renewals to manage and maintain the buildings. We have a museum building, and then we also have a museum off-site facility. Staff costs to support the operations at both of those facilities, and commercial operation costs for cafe, retail, ticketing, etc. We commissioned the report through the First Retail Group to look at the commercial activities in the museum to see if there was a way we could better adjust the layout or the offerings within the museum to generate a high level of revenue to assist council with these costs. So they looked at a few different options. At a high level, the current layout is considered well optimised for revenue generation due to the efficiencies between the staffing of the operations. They advised against fully relocating the retail to the CAF footprint, noting that this would likely compromise visibility, scale and profitability, but they did note that having a modest retail offering in the CAF location could enhance revenue provided it's not at the expense of a cafe experience. They also noted that an alternative location for retail, such as an additional building outside of the current museum footprint, could be considered, but is unlikely to generate a step change in revenue to the current proposed locations. They did note that there are opportunities for future improvement, including enhancing the range and presentation, increasing digital capacity, such as having website sales, and further integrating staffing across the operations. They explored the option of leasing the CAF to a commercial operator, and it noted that this could come at the expense of reducing the museum's agility and compromise service consistency unless a provider could provide services across ticketing, retail and CAF to achieve the same efficiencies as the business case was based on. One thing to note is that they did flag that cost escalations in the wider retail and hospitality sectors are affecting profitability across the industry. but our setting with the retail and cultural content offers a unique advantage because it mutually reinforces both experience and commercial viability by having integration between the museum activities. They did note that if we were to stage the reopening of the museum, that there are some reputational financial risks due to perceived negative impact on the early visitor experience and effectiveness of commercial offerings. The commercial offerings sit within the operational enablement part of the program, and the working group there will continue to explore the most appropriate commercial operating model, including layout, ownership and integration of ticketing, CAF and retail services, and that will be further considered as the program progresses. As mentioned throughout our presentation, the whole program carries several interrelated risks across funding, delivery and reputation. The primary risk, as mentioned by Alex, is relating to funding. So while the construction project is currently 100% funded, 27% of this, $7.1 million, is conditional on delivery of a fully operational museum. Funders have expressed concern over delays in progressing the exhibition, which has resulted in additional conditions on funding commitments. Hence, the $600,000 of exhibition funding being conditional on us progressing the developed design. If we do not continue to progress through the developed design, $661,700 in external funding is at risk for the exhibition project. $140,000 of that is subject to expiry clauses between July and October, and $340,000 of that does not have expiry clauses but are subject to progress payments related to progressing into and through the developed design stage. And then $181,700 of that, $661,000, is related to the Rotorua Trust Match Funding Loan. Delays in decision making also affect delivery capacity around staff recruitment, and then also the risks are discussed with the contractor capacity. Probably the biggest risk that outside of funding that the exhibition project is facing is deliverability risks, in terms of we are heading off a direction in a plan, but if we can't fund that plan that we're heading towards, then we will not be able to achieve that goal. Hence why we are looking at a variety of scenarios to reopen the museum, and that we're ensuring the exhibition design is flexible and can cater towards those scenarios, and that any work we do can be reused at a later date. Visitor experience is also a substantial risk due to not meeting the outcomes, and also a partial stage reopening can underwhelm visitors and really impact our reputation and early revenue gathering. Failure to provide clear direction beyond this meeting will necessitate reassessing the program and effectively signalling a focus on construction completion without a confirmed pathway to reopening the museum service. Up on the screen are the recommendations which we seek from Council today. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Will, for that. So, councillors, we're going to take questions around Will's presentation, also around the proposed recommendation. So we'll start with Councillor Waru, followed by Councillor Lee.
Tēnā koe te chairman, o tira kōrua, tātou katoa, e mihi atuna kia koutou. Just wanted to ask, well, thank you for the report. The $181,700, I think that's one part of it, but can you give us an idea of, because my understanding is a lot of the funding we've received for the project as a whole is hinging or has a condition, i.e. they expect a museum to open. How much of that funding has that attached to it?
Kia ora, Councillor. There's $17.1 million of the construction funding that is conditional on the museum being reopened. Approximately $5.5 million of that is related to payments that will be made on the day that the museum reopens or after we reopen. There's a further $12 million which isn't relating exactly to us reopening, but is dependent on the museum being reopened. And so if council was not to be making progress towards that outcome, there is an opportunity that they could seek to cease payments through that period.
Kia ora, and the dollar for dollar deal that's on the table now, well, in my experience, that's quite it's a normal thing for a lot of funders to expect that. I think for me it's a no-brainer, and I just want to indicate that I'll be moving those the motion that's been put forward to support the kaupapa. Of course I will. So thank you. I don't have any more questions as such, but I will make some comments when we get into the comment section. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you for your report. I'm pleased to report that most of my concerns from last month have been resolved, as we have talked. I do have one outstanding concern that I wonder if you could address. And I have flagged this with Alex previously. So I like museums. My family and I went to Bay of Islands after the election, and we spent a bit of time up there. The reason I mention that is that I went to the Waitangi Museum. In fact, I went back 3 times. And I happen to have been told since that the good people at Workshop E actually designed that museum, didn't they? Yeah. So I'm quite sure they will do a wonderful job. So the one concern that I'd like to flag, and wonder if you could provide a response to, is it concerns the historical accuracy of Rotorua as it would be portrayed in the museum. Now, the reason I ask that is we have had...
Point of order, Madam Chair. Irrelevance. I think this has been really well covered in the past. In the past presentations, we're rehashing...
Sorry, Councillor Lee, would you like to just maybe reframe the question, given that we've got Alex and as the Community Experience GM and Will as the overviewing the construction. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to answer that question. So if you want to just, we're talking here about...
Well, I'm looking, Madam Chair, at page 30 of their report. So it would seem unlikely that what my question is not relevant. And the nature of my question has progressed in the last month when I have had a conversation with Alex. So I'm looking for a public assurance because I don't want to name names, but we have had respected kamatua come into this chamber. And
Councillor Lee, sorry, I'll just stop you there. So do you want to reframe the question that is in a form that both Alex or Will can answer? Or
well, I'm trying to, Madam Chair. My question concerns whether the true history of Rotorua is going to be recorded. So even in the Daily Post, it has been reported, for example, that Ngāti Whakaui gifted the entire land upon which Rotorua sits. Now, that simply doesn't accord with the Royal Commission of Inquiry from 1948.
Order, Madam Chair.
So,
relevance. I think we need to stick
Councillor Lee, I think we've gone along this line and we've previously had discussions on this. I think you have an opinion on that, and I'm sure that everyone has a different recollection and a view on history and events. So I think we'll move on from
Thank you,
this
Madam
now.
Chair.
This is
Councillor Lee, I'm moving on now. So do you have another question? If not, I'll take a question from another councillor. Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? So Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just clarification. When you sought feedback from us, who did you then go and run our feedback and suggestions through?
Kia ora, Councillor. At this stage, they've been collated as part of our full register of feedback, and then that will go, if we move into the developed design, then that will go to Workshop E. And before we sort of get fully into the developed design process, we will adjust the concept design to address the feedback, and that will be agreed before we move forward.
Sorry, I'm confused. It seemed that, I know it was my suggestion, I'll take ownership of that. It seemed that that had been refuted in what you said, that they would not recommend that. So who would not recommend that?
I think I think the question's around the layout rather than the exhibition.
Correct.
Oh, apologies, Councillor Patterson. I thought you were referring to the feedback around the exhibition design. So we've used First Retail Group Limited, and we provided the design that you gave us, the layout, to them for feedback. And their feedback that while it could be utilised, having an even spread across retail and hospitality provides more revenue opportunity within that layout, and to focus predominantly on retail has some risks that might reduce the revenue gathering.
Okay, thank you. So it was an external group that you ran. Thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify. And just the comments also that were made about the cafe profitability and the current situation, as the man sitting next to me can probably attest to, that cafes are not necessarily making the kind of money that we expect them to make. Are we confident that just because of the location, that the being inside that wonderful building, that will make up for that?
The feedback we've had from the commercial consultant is that there's an advantage by having the hospitality associated with a cultural experience, and both the museum experience helps draw in commercial users, and then the commercial experience also helps draw people into the museum, so they can be mutually beneficial operations.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, was it Maxwell? Did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I ask my question, I always like raising this, so we never forget. Thank you, Ngāti Whakaue, for the generosity. The question that I've got is on page 27. If we do not continue to progress through the developed design, 661,000 in external funding is at risk. I know you've touched on it, but can you just reassure me that the figures that we've got here is kosher, and not only that, we have so far put aside 1,062,000 been set aside, but and there is a commitment already for 800,000 on top of the 200,000 they've given. I think I acknowledge their generosity too. But can you reassure me?
Kia ora, Councillor. Yes, so to date we have spent close to $600,000, and of the $1,062,000 that we've got raised, $140,000 of that is time bound and must be handed back through progress payments, and that's 3 separate grants. And then there's $340,000 of further grants which have progress payment clauses when we go into, and then also through developed design. So we won't receive all of those payments on the day we go into developed design, but through and once we complete that process. But yeah, we're confident in the funding that we have raised, and we are confident that the $363,000 gap is correct.
So right to July and August, next couple of months, I hate to see any money go back to any of these funders.
Hence a comment around a decision being required by June, because money will need to be handed back next month if we do not have progress which we can show our funders by that date.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I know there are still more questions and we still have the resolution to deal with. As I mentioned at the start, just the way in which this agenda has been structured and because people have been asked to come and present at a particular time, I'm going to just pause the council meeting for now. We will resume with Alex and Will in the hot seats. So we will just give you a minute, just change to the Local Waters Done Well hearing catalogue and page 8 of the agenda. Sorry, councillors, we're just confirming what submitters are here to speak. Okay, councillors, I'm going back to page 8 of the agenda. I need a mover and a seconder that the report Local Water Done Well hearings be received. Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor O'Brien, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. We have a number of submitters that have made submissions and have asked to present their submissions orally. So what I'll do is I'll ask them to come forward. The time allowed for each submitter is 5 minutes. I won't be taking any questions. So we have Robert O'Cal. The page 11 on the agenda for the submissions. Good afternoon, Robert. So just make sure that the little green light is on the microphone. You will also see on the screen in front of you that there is a timer. So if you could please start wrapping up when it gets to about 4 minutes 30, as you will be asked to stop at around 5 minutes. So over to you, and thank you for taking the time to come in and make your submission today.
Well, I've had a quick look at the various bits of information. Going into the Department of Internal Affairs report makes it quite clear that water finance is to be ring-fenced. The era of one big bucket of money that can be squandered and then, oops, nothing left for infrastructure is over. Local Water Done Well. The Ministry of the Environment has a technical guideline for delineating drinking water, June 2018. On page 34, it outlines the catchment protection provisions. Looking at the water supply for the main city, I note the catchment boundary clearly is between the Pokaitu and Eorangi streams. That the headwaters of the Nongataha Tuhina streams extends beyond the city boundary into the Waikato region seems to be a potential problem, since you don't have any control over it, neither does the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. If you look on the various maps, you'll see that on the BOP aerial map, specifically section E2, shows these areas. So what we have is the Pokaitu River, which drains into Environment Waikato, is within the Bay of Plenty region, and the Utahina, Nongataha and Rangi streams all are based in their catchments in the Environment Waikato region. So whenever you try and manage this in terms of the three aspects of protecting drinking water, you've got presumably sections 1 and section 2 of the Drinking Water Act, which controls the immediate spring and the small surrounding area within your district, and the overall catchment and recharge area is not within your district. Parts of it are. So, taking that as the basis, I looked into Google Earth, and I also looked at the BOP aerial map. Both of those show that there is forestry on logging forestry rather than natural forestry in these areas, and they are being actively logged. So, my 3 points were, how is the catchment protected when it is not in the district? What provisions have been made for managing contamination from logging? If you look on the Google Earth map, it clearly shows that logging tracks go from the ridges which are forested and which are being currently logged across the various streams. So that there needs to be, and then all of that, since there doesn't appear to be any eastward extension of these logging roads, they all seem to go back up to South Road, parallel along the various ridges and along the various catchments that feed into your main drinking water system. And thirdly, how is the protection organised now that the site of the wells is in tribal ownership? So, to me it seems, and especially since this was all published about 2 weeks ago, that there's been predetermination of the whole of this local water's done well, and it doesn't appear to have been any point in me coming and making a presentation when you've already predetermined the outcome. I'm disappointed.
Thank you, Mr. O'Kell, for taking the time to come in today to make your submission. Our second submitter is Belinda Cridge. It's page 13 on the agenda, councillors. Good afternoon, Belinda. Please start when you're ready and you'll see the counter start as well.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. E mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua, ko Belinda Cridge tōku ingoa, no Rotorua aho. So I need to make it clear that I'm submitting as a ratepayer of the Rotorua region. I work for Water New Zealand, which is a national member body for water infrastructure. Anything I say is not on behalf of that organisation or any of their subsidiaries. I submitted on this proposal saying that I do not agree with the decision to wait for 2 years to form a conjoined water entity. So the proposal as put forward as the prepared proposal was for Rotorua to stay as an independent water supplier and then seek partnership. I don't think this is sustainable, and I don't think it's the best option for Rotorua ratepayers. So the reason I think that is we have clear evidence that smaller rate bases cannot afford water infrastructure, and at this point I actually want to acknowledge the amount we've spent on our water infrastructure, the wastewater infrastructure and the ongoing plans into stormwater. Thank you, particularly on behalf of the stormwater community. Thank you for recognising stormwater. But the costs associated with this infrastructure are going to go up, and they're going to go up markedly. We're already starting to see things like the levies come in for Taumata Arawai, Water Services Authority. There will be more levies or charges. The cost of meeting the standards is going to go up, and I don't think that going it alone is going to perform for our ratepayers. There's good data out there from Department of Internal Affairs and other agencies to say that there is efficiency at scale, and we're not going to get those efficiencies. We also run the risk of being in a poor neighbour position, that everybody else has formed an entity, a conjoined entity, and we have to deal with their terms 2 years down the track. So I don't think that will get us the best outcome. My final concern is actually around natural disasters. We're one big storm, one big fire away from losing a lot of infrastructure. And if we're then going into a negotiation position with partners with poor quality infrastructure that's had some sort of impact like a Cyclone Gabriel, then again, we're not going to be able to negotiate well. So I believe we should be at the negotiating table now. We shouldn't be waiting. We should be moving forward with speed to partner with local government, other local government entities around our infrastructure. I think that's the best for Rotorua ratepayers and will get us the best cost long term.
Thank you, Belinda, for taking the time to come in and make your personal submission today. Okay, our next submitter, it's page 18 on the agenda. It's Te Ruranga o Ngāti Kiaroa, Ngāti Tuara, Mary Corbett and Arahia Hoani Waka are here to make the submission. Tēnā korua, Mary and Arahia. Are both the microphones on? Yes. So when you're ready to begin.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Mary Corbett ahau. I'm the chairperson of Te Ruranga o Ngāti Kiaroa, Ngāti Tuara. I also sit as a trustee on Karamutakina Trust. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of our hapu. We hold a formal partnership agreement with this council regarding Karamutakina Springs and the associated water take. This partnership is not symbolic, it reflects our treaty relationship, our kaitiaki obligations and our whakapapa to the puna. It recognises our mātauranga and our right to participate in decisions about how Waimāori is accessed, protected and governed in our rohe. We are here because this partnership must be respected, maintained and upheld under any future water delivery model Council adopts. Our position is clear. Ngāti Kiaroa, Ngāti Tuara supports option 1, continued in-house delivery of water services by Rotorua Lakes Council. We support this model because it protects our existing partnership with Council and keeps governance and accountability local. It allows us to continue working directly with Council staff to co-design environmental protections and monitoring frameworks. It best enables us to exercise our role as kaitiaki and embed tikanga, te arawa values and intergenerational thinking into decision making. This model provides greater transparency and responsiveness to mana whenua and the wider community. It recognises that water is not just infrastructure, it is a living taonga with whakapapa and mauri, and decisions about it must reflect that. We have serious concerns about options 2 and 3, the council-controlled organisation and the multi-council model. These options pose real risks. They make governance further away from local treaty relationships. They may dilute our influence and undermine existing agreements. And they introduce models where commercial or external considerations may override environmental and cultural imperatives. If the Council considers moving in that direction, we would require our partnership to be legally carried through and recognised in the new structure, a guaranteed governance seat or decision-making role for mana whenua, and binding protections for the mauri of our puna and the integrity of our cultural values. In closing, I want to re-emphasise, we are not stakeholders, we are mana whenua. We descend from the puna. Our role is not to be consulted once decisions are made. Our role is to help shape those decisions from the outset as partners under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We seek a formal commitment from Council to retain option 1 as the preferred model, assurance that our Karamutakina partnership agreement will be fully upheld, ongoing meaningful kanohi kitea kanohi engagement as the water services plan is developed ahead of the September 2025 deadline. We look forward to continuing this relationship in good faith, grounded in trust, tikanga and shared commitment to sustainable, culturally respectful water management. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Thank you for your time.
Tēnā koe, Mary, for that. Arahia, did you have anything to say? No, thank you very much for both of you for coming in today to make your submission on behalf of the Runanga.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. That concludes the local water done well hearing. So just take a minute, go back to now page 22 of your agenda. Just make sure we have Alex and as well disappeared for a minute. Okay, so we've got Will back now with Alex. So I was at Councillor Barker for a question. Oh, sorry. Any other questions to Will or Alex?
Sorry, Madam Chair, just signalling that I would like to second.
Okay, I have a question, but it's not a question to either of you that I don't think you can answer this. This is a question to the CFO and to the CE. We have a recommendation that is suggesting that we reduce an OPEX budget by 181,000 to offset a CAPEX allocation. We've been told during annual plan and long-term plan deliberations the impact of OPEX and CAPEX on rates. So OPEX, I think, was 1.2 million per 1%, and on CAPEX it's 0.001 or something like that. So why are we swapping CAPEX and OPEX around in budgets? It doesn't, and these two things don't seem to align in terms of dollar value and impact on the financial strategy.
Through the Chair, just to be absolutely clear, you cannot swap OPEX for CAPEX and vice versa. They are independent types of expenditure. The decision to match the Rotorua Trust's 182,000 would be an additional borrowing. It would be an additional capital funding of $182,000 of debt. What the Chief Executive and the GM of Customer Experience have undertaken to do is to ensure that their operating budgets are underspent for the year, so that from a cash perspective it is neutral, but they are completely different types of transactions, and they have their own treatments when we come to process those payments and fund them.
Oh, from my perspective, I think it's quite confusing how the recommendation has been worded, but okay. Any further questions, Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. He's not here. I was just going to ask along a similar lines.
Or maybe we'll ask the CE to come back, because I think it's important, given that we are talking some accounting treatments and budget lines which don't align with things that we have done in the past, and also around questions that I'd asked at a previous meeting around changes in budgets. So maybe we'll just take a break for 5 minutes and we'll ask the CE to come back to the meeting so that he can answer these questions, because I think they're best answered by our CE rather than you, Alex, or Will. Pause the meeting for 5 minutes if anyone wants to grab. The live stream is back on. Councillor Brown, we'll just recommence the meeting. Thank you, councillors. So, Councillor Patterson, you also had a question around recommendation F in the resolution up there. So the CE is now back.
Thank you for coming back, Mr. CE. Yeah, my question relates to, we're currently only a few weeks away from finalising the annual plan, and we've been told on numerous occasions that we've been through every budget line to find savings. We can't find any more. There's no more money in this pot, and yet here we are saying, yep, we've managed to massage them a bit more to ensure that this will have a negative outcome, a nil outcome, basically, just by shifting things around. So can you explain how that works, please?
Absolutely, Councillor Patterson. So we shouldn't conflate budget setting with expenditure. So budget setting for next year is where we are allocating budgets for a whole lot of activities. And we can come back to that in the annual plan discussion around how I've advised where we have reduced budget significantly to a tune of around $4 million from what they could have been. This is not about budget setting. This is about expenditure that is budgeted for this financial year that we're not going to spend. So that's avoiding expenditure that was already budgeted for, as opposed to reducing budgets. So that's the distinction between the two. This is OPEX that has been budgeted for in order to keep it cash neutral, this decision cash neutral, which my CFO will tell me is not an accounting term, but it's an easily understood term to say that we're going to, we're asking through this paper for some additional CapEx so that we will have more CapEx expenditure. It's not more CapEx expenditure than overall council was going to spend anyway, because we're going to underspend our CapEx budget for the year. However, it is CapEx that was never formally allocated to the museum exhibition, and that's why we need a council decision for it. I am not authorised to simply swap out that OPEX for that CapEx. So that's why I've unfortunately had to bring you quite a complicated paper because of the accounting rules associated with how those two different types of expenditure are categorised.
Well put. Thank you.
Right, any further questions, councillors? If not, we have had a proposed mover and seconder for this. There are a number of parts to this, so I can take the motion as a whole. It's been moved by Councillor Waru. It's been seconded by Councillor Wang. Do you wish to speak to this, Councillor Waru? Thank you. Are there any other councillors that wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Barker, followed by Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this motion. It's a critical time to make a decision here. There are lots of things riding on this decision, not excluding the actual construction project itself. The project steering group with the subject matter experts have endorsed the design and in their professional opinions, they believe that it's a good design and that they believe that Workshop E are a great organisation to produce this for us. Workshop E is on pause, and if we do not continue today, then we could possibly lose them as a provider, and that would mean all sorts of other levels of risk as well. There is a big funding risk here, and that's been alluded to, and we are going to secure more certainty around our funding by agreeing to the match with the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust that will secure not only that funding but also another $660,000 worth of funding as well, and also will secure or guarantee that the construction payments will be made still because they are time sensitive and also based on the opening of a completed museum. So I think based on the fact that we have grants that will be expiring in July and August potentially if we don't make or July and October, worth 140k. We are also liable to, put the construction project at risk as well.
to go ahead today has its high level of risk for the organisation and the project in general. And before I close, I'd just like to thank the members of the project steering group, in particular our subject matter experts, one of whom is here today. They have given their time and expertise to help us better understand what a good exhibition looks like and what a good provider looks like. And so I would highly recommend that we go on their suggestion and move forward with this project and also allocate the extra funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ditto to everything that Councillor Barker said. Took some of the thanks out of my presentation. But I do also want to thank the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust and the other sponsors have come through, and the project committee definitely. If I can add one more to to what we've been presented this afternoon, I think please have one opening rather than 3 or 4 staged openings. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against this? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Waru as the mover, because I'm only going to take 3, 4 and 1 against. So, Councillor Lee, you wish to speak against this motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would dearly love to be able to support this, and in fact, if you are willing, Madam Chair, to take option A or not option A, but paragraph A separately, that would be the only one that I would wish to vote against. I have asked today for assurance that we would have the actual history of Rotorua as part of the museum exhibition. I've been told that assurance is not going to be forthcoming, so that's disappointing. That's
Point
really
of order,
disappointing.
Madam Chair, that's misrepresentation.
There's no misrepresentation. I asked for an assurance that the true history of Rotorua would be told. We've got 9 sections.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
What's your point of order?
Misrepresentation.
Well, can I have an assurance that the actual history of Rotorua will be represented? Well, perhaps you need to rule on whether there's a misrepresentation here or not, Madam Chair, because if there's a misrepresentation...
Councillor Lee, I have ruled so. Can you please just finish your comments?
Well, I'd like to, but I keep on getting interrupted. So, there's 9 sections available in the south wing and the permanent wing to tell Rotorua's story, and that story is well told in the 1948 Royal Commission of Inquiry when various grievances were brought by Ngāti Whakaui, and they were laid out in detail in that legal document, and as a result of that, Ngāti Whakaui were offered £16,500 in full and final settlement, which they accepted, and this is part of Rotorua's history. So it does say here that this exhibition is to enable Te Arawa storytelling in a sympathetic way. Well, that's fine, but if the history of Rotorua is not going to be told, then it's not a museum that I can, a museum exhibition that I can endorse. So.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Waru, as the mover, you have the right of reply, so final speaker on this.
Kia ora, te tiamana, thank you. Firstly, I'll address the actual kaupapa. As I moved it, I support it wholeheartedly. I am also very grateful for the support we have from funders to be able to get this going. I think it's an important part of the community. The community has already said that to us. How many times? I think we're obligated to follow up. As for the I think that's 181,700, and I accept the kōrero that our CEO has given around how we've come to to be able to seek, well, to find that money. It's not new money, it's money that's already been budgeted. So it's a no-brainer. I think as Councillor Brown would say, it's a no-brainer. And I think we need to be able to give assurances to those who are working on this project and those who are in the community that are passionate about this project, some assurance, some actual assurance that we're going to move on with the scope of it and move forward. So I think that's what this covers. And I, like I said, wholeheartedly support it. I have to address that. There's been some kōrero that's being forwarded that you want, certain people want assurance around the telling of the history of Rotorua and to actually have the real history. Well, I would say that if you knew the people we're working with, they are from, the integrity is unquestionable. And I will tell it, warts and all. And it actually might not be something that might not be liked by all people, but it will be told. As a person who was quoted the 1948 Royal Commission, well, actually, it's funny that we were Ngāti Pōkau, we were not allowed to even choose their own legal representatives. They didn't even have anything to do with writing the report. Actually, my grandfather was there at the time. So he has a point of having a kōrero. Maybe there's some history there that might be nice to hear. So, there's a lot of things we can say, but actually, in the end of the day, ko tēnei taone hipi I whakatakotohia, hei taonga, mo ngā iwi katoa te ao. That's what it says in the agreement. So I suggest we go along in that spirit and get on with it. But I think there are more stories, not just Ngāti Pōkau, there are Te Arawa stories. And naturally it's going to be Te Arawa stories because I konei a Te Arawa I te tūtai. And then there's going to be, as has already been said in some of the presentations, it will show a natural progression and timeline of when all the other history that we still hold dear, the war, all the farming, forestry, all these things start coming into play. The trout fishing, I think I saw a picture of my koro Wiremu Danzi on fishing how many trout in a day. So, it's all these kind of things that will come through. Just as important as any other kōrero that will be in there. And I think it's a bit hard to ask for assurances when that's what our staff always have done and always will do, and indeed our experts. So, kawai hupa waku kōrero I konei, tahi rau pai he neti te tautoko, let's go. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Councillors, this motion has been expressed in parts because it's written as A to H. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the motion in parts. So I'm going to put it in parts. So I'm going to take 2A and then I will take 2B to H. So, councillors, the first one is we accept the recommendation from the Exhibition Project Steering Group to accept concept design and progress to develop design subject to approved funding. All those in favour, please signal aye. Please raise your hands. Against? And are there abstentions? Sorry, so just so we can capture this. All those in favour, please raise their hands. That is carried. Thank you. And against? Councillor Lee, thank you. Oh, and Councillor O'Brien, thank you. Right, I'm now going to put parts B to H, and I'm not going to read them out because I think everyone else can read. So I'll put 2B to H. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Against? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Moving on now to a slightly different topic. Move to page 42 of your agendas. We're just going to have a changeover of some personnel. Page 42, so just checking, I've lost JP. I tell you what, councillors, we'll take a 5-minute refreshment break since we're going to talk refreshments in a minute. And I'll just I need JP back in the chamber, so come back at 1:45, thanks. Line 2. So, page 42 of the agenda, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the report, Local Alcohol Policy 2025 deliberations be received. Thank you, Councillor Wang. Thank you, Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. And welcome Alex and Greg to overview the presentation.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you local alcohol policy this afternoon. This is just around deliberation, so feedback from consultation, and for you to provide a direction for the development of the policy going forward. Consultation, just a reminder, a brief recap. Consultation was held between the 28th of February and the 31st of March. There were 144 submissions received, of which you will have seen all of them in your stela. 15 submitters wanted to speak at the hearing, and we had quite a good turnout of the 15 that wanted to speak. Engagement was largely done through a social media digital campaign. We did email out direct key stakeholders an email just raising awareness that this was happening. There were a couple of drop-in opportunities for license holders and the social sector to come and speak around the technical aspects of what is being proposed. And there was also an attendance at the markets just to raise awareness of this with the general community. You would have noted through some of the feedback that there were some challenges around some of the proposals that we had put forward. We have taken a targeted legal review on these specific issues that were raised, and due to that legal review, we've decided to withdraw the pre-application engagement of sensitive sites, as well as the reducing of the hours of remote sale of alcohol. So what we found is that these fall outside the current legislation, although other councils are now proposing some of these aspects. There are different mechanisms that we could potentially lever in some of these areas, but we see these as a risk legally, so we've withdrawn these from the deliberations proposals. Consultation topics were revolved around the 4 different types of licenses. So we had the off-licenses, on-licenses, club licenses, and special licenses. Under the off-license section, we spoke about density, so how many stores there are in our community, proliferation, trading hours, opening and closing hours, and then the discretionary conditions that the DLC or District Licensing Committee can impose. In the on-license category, we spoke about the trading hours and discretionary conditions, and in the remaining 2 categories, we spoke about discretionary conditions. Madam Chair, I think just some guidance from you as to how you would like to take this forward.
I think given the size of the presentation and each of the different categories requires a different decision, we'll take them one by one. So before you start the off-licence proposal, we just have to deal, just so I can keep my agenda in order since you're not here beside me to tell me, sorry JP, that there is a resolution, I don't know, Rob, if you can bring it up. So we do need to note that the decisions made during these deliberations determine the final local alcohol policy 2025, and that the final local alcohol policy is planned to be adopted by Council on 25 June 2025. So before I put that, are there any questions to Greg around those 2 proposed resolutions? Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Thank you both for being here today. And sorry, I'm comfortable, JP or whoever wants to answer this. I take it from the reading there, if this is adopted on the 25th of June, the rules become operational from that date?
Greg can answer, or Alex can answer that.
So we have to wait 30 days after, so we can adopt it, then we have to publicly notify the community of the new LAP, and then we have to wait 30 days for it to take effect.
Thank you. Could I have a secondary? So, forgive me, if someone puts in an application today, and it may not be decided by the relevant DLC until maybe after those dates or before, I don't know quite how, if there's any meetings planned, are they susceptible, depending on when their date comes up, for it to be signed off under the current rules, or do they come under the new rules from the 25th of June or the 30 days, 25th of July? How does that work?
So any applications that are received before the new policy takes effect has to be considered under the old LAP. So we can't prevent a flurry of applications coming in, but I will say that there is a rigorous alcohol licensing process, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they will have get a license. It will still go through the DLC and the tri-agencies as well.
Thank you. So assuming, if we carry this through from the 25th, the DLC must stick with the current rules that they have in place and can only, if we decide to move forward with some of the recommendations you have about their rulings, they can only take place or be implemented from the 25th of June. Is that right? Or sorry, 25th of July, whichever.
Yes, so the new LAP can be adopted by Council on the 25th of June, but it can't take effect until, I think the earliest we estimate is the 1st of August.
Thank you. And finally, can I just ask then, so if there is a flurry of applications now for, say, off licences, we will have to consider that under the current rules?
Correct, yes.
Even in areas that we may still later on vote to say should be restricted?
Yep, correct.
Thank you very much. I just wanted clarification on those. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions around just those two resolutions? If not, can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Wang and Councillor Waru. I'm going to put those two resolutions. All those in favour, please signal aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. So now, Greg, will go to the first of your slides around the off-licence proposal.
So the first category under the off-licence was density. So that is around our proliferation. How we had 4 options that we put to the community. The option 1 was to leave it as it currently is. Option 2 was, and in preferred in brackets was what you had decided to go out as a preferred option through the consultation process, was a temporary freeze for 3 years and a presumption against thereafter. Option 3 was a permanent freeze in areas of deprivation 9 and 10 only, with option 4 being a combination of both 2 and 3. So under this specific proposal, we had 73% supporting Council's preferred option of option 2, 7% preferred option 4, which was a combination of 2 and 3, and 19% supporting option 1, which was no freeze, as new licences might be needed and it could limit growth in Rotorua. So that was some of the feedback that had come through. In addition to those 4 options, and bearing in mind the themes and the feedback that has come through, there's 2 other possible considerations as well, or exemptions that could be thought of from yourselves. One is an exemption of new off-licences that have notified Council through a regulatory process, such as consenting, prior to the adoption of the policy. So noting that the applicant will still need to be subject to the usual alcohol licensing process, so that still have to apply through the DLC. This would not exempt them from a DLC process. This would just allow them to apply for that DLC, for that license. And then the other option is for an exemption for remote sales, complementary and auctioneer off-license types. So what we found in post-consultation is that the Auckland LAP, for example, has excluded these. These are sort of niche off-licenses that remote sales are only allowed to be sold online, and you find wineries particularly using that. Complementary, which is not a food, it's not alcohol sold as part of a food or beverage service. It's sold just alongside some of that, and then an auctioneer off-license where they're actually auctioning off potentially expensive wines or etc. So those 3 categories, we've put them up as an option for you to consider as well, and I'll leave that with you, Madam Chair, as to how we take that forward.
Thanks, Greg. Just having a look at that. So just under the exemption for the new off-licences, that includes supermarkets, and it's also potentially new liquor stores. So if they're already in the process, we don't have to worry about that process. It means that they are...
Yeah. So what we have found as well is that there are a couple of off-licences that are already put in consents with Council, they're in progress already. And so we put this through as an option for you to consider based on that process already being started, and then allowing those, possibly allowing those premises to still apply through the DLC process. So that includes supermarkets, it includes all off-licences that currently have a consenting process or regulatory process with Council.
Okay, councillors, I'm flagging that I'm happy to move option 2 with those 2 possible exemptions, but I'll take questions from any other councillors around these preferred options. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I recall 2 of the more substantial submissions were from supermarket and liquor retailers, particularly the supermarket ones. They had some questions about the legality of what we were doing. Did you look into that?
Yes, we certainly did. I think it's probably, first off, I should say, the supermarkets are used to challenging LAPs, so this didn't come as a surprise to us. They took Auckland Council to court for the best part of a decade, so we were expecting challenges, and it's fair to say that they don't like change. Of course, we took their concerns seriously, so we did seek legal advice, and as a result have removed the pre-application engagement, and we have removed the remote sale delivery hours as well. So we have listened to them. In regards to the other elements of the proposals that they were contesting, so the density, the trade-in hours and the conditions, or some of the conditions, we feel that these are fair and proportionate measures. We have produced a large research report outlining alcohol harm in Rotorua and why these measures are needed to reduce and manage alcohol harm. So yes, we've looked into it and sought legal advice and are happy with our position.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Questions? Councillor Barker?
Just signaling I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Is there any further questions to the team? Otherwise, I can put that. So what I have proposed to move is that we take option 2, which is no new off-licences will be granted for 3 years, and there will be a presumption against any new off-licence applications being granted thereafter, but also with the with an exemption of new off-licences that have been notified through Council's regulatory processes, e.g. consenting, prior to the adoption of the policy, and to note the applicant will still be subject to the usual alcohol licensing process, and therefore it is not guaranteed a licence will be granted, and also the other exemption around a remote sale, complementary or auctioneer off-licence types. I was happy to move that. Councillor Barker has indicated she's happy to second that. Is there any one that wishes to speak to this? Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't be supporting this. I'm not much of a prohibitionist, I'm afraid, and as has been noted by one of the submitters, there were 3,000 licences in New Zealand in 1989, and that's increased to 12,000 since then, but alcohol consumption has decreased by 31%, so the increased access to alcohol has not actually translated into increased consumption. So I would be supporting the status quo if this motion were to fail.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Any further comments, councillors? Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you. I also support this option. I think we've heard very clearly from our community through the submission process and also otherwise that they do believe that there is a proliferation of off-licences available in Rotorua, that this does have a correlation between the availability of off-licence and the harm that's created in our community. And I think that it shows a really strong signal to Rotorua that not only have we listened, but we're also taking community harm and safety seriously. This is one of the few tools that councils have to be able to have a direct influence, and I would be delighted to support you in supporting this preferred option 2 as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there's no other comments, I think this one's fairly self-explanatory. We do wish to reduce the density and the harm that it causes, but also still allowing for the opportunity where there are planning processes already underway, because we know that they take such a long time. So there is also, whilst there is that presumption, there is also the opportunity, because remember this gets reviewed at a future date, but at the moment we're signalling that we want to reduce that density. So Councillor Barker, do you wish to add any further commentary?
No, thank you. I don't need to add anything.
Okay, so I'm now going to put that, so that is 3, B, E and F as it's up there. I don't think I need to read it out unless anyone... Okay, so I'm now going to put that, so all those in favour please signal aye. So raise your hands, I think it might be easier. That's and against. Thank you, that is carried. Move on now to off-licence trading hours.
Thank you, Rob. If you can bring up that presentation.
Sorry, we'll just get Rob just to flick between the two screens.
Thank you. So our next proposal was around the off-licence trading hours. The option one was to keep it as a status quo, which was the hours would remain at 7 a.m. to 10:15 p.m., except for the period between 11 and 24 December, where the hours, specifically the closing hours, would be extended to 11 p.m. Option two, which was the preferred option put forward to the community, was around earlier closing times, so keeping it at 7 a.m. but closing at 9 p.m. without the period over December being extended. And then option three was earlier closing times and later opening times, so that was 9 to 9. What we saw in this was, in this proposal, was around 70% of the community supported option 2, which was the preferred option, and these respondents felt that this would reduce alcohol harm and improve safety. 10% supported reducing trading hours further, so 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and 20% supported keeping the same trading hours. So some of this mentioned that it will be inconveniencing people who are wanting to buy alcohol later in the evening. So happy to leave that there for you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Any questions to Greg around this? So option 1 was a status quo. The recommendation is option 2 with the reduction. So, Councillor Waru?
Yeah, kia ora, te chairman. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Alex. Just wanted to ask, in terms of the trading hours for option, I think it was 2, if you could refresh my memory, please, around the supermarkets and the closing times, or whether, I just can't remember what the...
Sure, so the ones I can remember off the top of my head, so Pack and Save, so foodstuffs, they close at 9 p.m, and then Countdown, I believe, is 10 o'clock. And I think New World is 9, but I'm not entirely sure, so apologies.
So that particular option wouldn't have an adverse effect on them?
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, it would. Not for all of them, so some of them are already closing at 9 o'clock. But this is not something that is new to them either. This is a trend across the country, and so they are having to roll this out across their stores.
Yes, I remember that. Thank you. It's just more of a clarification for me. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions, Councillor Brown? 4B, so that's been signalled. Councillor Brown will move 4B. Any other questions to Greg and Alex on this one? If not, is there a seconder for 4B? Thank you, Councillor Waru. You wish to speak to that, Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, given the question that Councillor Waru's asked, I suspect, I don't know this is true, but I suspect Countdown's open a late, an extra hour, so they can pick up some alcohol sales. So I would respectfully suggest that this will bring all of the closing times for supermarkets into the same. So this makes sense to me, and the community supports it.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Waru, did you wish to speak? Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although I do support the reduced hours for this one, I do support option 3 would be my preference. We heard from a lot of young people who, children who did tell us that the oversaturation of the alcohol premises, especially near schools, and the adverse, encouragement that signals, especially to young people, and they wanted stronger trading hour restrictions during those school times. And I think, especially between that 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. time when children are going to school, that is, that'll be right in their faces. So I don't want to not support this, but I will be voting against this one, and just signalling that if it does fail, that I will be moving option 3.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Lee?
I'd prefer to support the status quo on this occasion. Again, we're putting hurdles and difficulties in the way of business people and the public, and the freedom of choice that should be available in a free and democratic society. I trust people to be grown-ups and make grown-up decisions, so I'd be happy to move option 1 were this motion to fail.
Okay, if there's no further comments, it's been moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Waru. Option 2, trading hours reduced 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. All those in favour, please signal aye. That is carried. And against? Thank you. Moving now to off-licence conditions.
So the proposal that went out on discretionary conditions for off licences, the first option was around the status quo, which was to keep the current conditions in place. This included the implementation of SIPTED principles, and alcohol product advertising must not be 50% of the premise facade. The option 2, which was the preferred option that you had decided to go out with, was to retain the principles of the... Sorry, was it right? Sorry, just want to check. Retain the principles of the current discretionary conditions and then include additional discretionary conditions, which should be considered for the application of off licences. I think I just wanted to note as well that during consultation we did get challenged on the wording of the use of the word mandatory under discretionary conditions, and so we have sought legal advice on that and had a look at some of the other LAPs, and what we have found is that that would just be a tweak of the wording under the discretionary conditions category, so does not limit the use of discretionary conditions under discretionary conditions. We would just have to change the wording to the DLC and ALA should include the following conditions unless there is a good reason not to do so, as opposed to mandatory. So this will apply to, the same clause will apply to on-licenses, club licenses and special licenses.
Okay, any questions to Greg and Alex on this one? I think in the option 2 it had been flagged in the paper that those additional conditions could be things such as no alcohol advertising on shop facades, restrictions on single sales of beer, ciders and RTDs, and a requirement for the social responsibility policy. Are there any other types of additional conditions, or is that kind of covered the gambit of them?
So there were a few other optional conditions that were listed. Sorry, it is on the presentation. So CCTV was listed as an optional condition that the DLC can add. Oh yeah, and the rest are up there now, just for staff to consider.
Okay, thank you. Those were such as, so there are examples. I would be happy to move option 2. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Wing. Is there any discussion? Sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question, sorry, I'm a little lost track of that. Are those not compulsory but could be brought through the process? Should they, DLC is it?
Correct.
Makes the decision. So not compulsory but could be introduced. Okay.
Yes.
So, Councillor Waru, so I'll just take this back. So I'll just go back to questions then. So there seems to be a bit of a confusion since I haven't put the...
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this option is quite a bit more broad than the first, the status quo. However, are these, you might not be able to say, are these, conditions or proposed conditions that could be, are they negotiable with the council, or is it all dependent on where the shop is and all this kind of stuff? What's the criteria?
So all of the conditions are optional and at the discretion of the DLC. So the first section, we have listed ones that we think the DLC should add unless there's a good reason not to, but they're quite straightforward ones which are really, good practice for the premise. I think it's important to remember, so the DLC can only add conditions that are fair and proportionate. So there is a process where the DLC will add the conditions to a licence holder's permit, you could say, and they will have the ability to appeal that if they wish to. I would also just like to add that this won't really kick in until after the 3-year period.
But another question. So could the applicant actually, if the conditions come out, the applicant would be well in their rights to say, well, hang on, this is not fair or whatever like that. So there's still that opportunity to challenge?
Correct, yes. Yeah, the Act allows them to challenge the conditions applied.
Thank you.
Councillor Barker, followed by Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. In that case, I was just looking at the resolution itself, and it actually says, and a requirement to have a social responsibility policy, so that sort of makes it sound like you must have.
I think, I think it's a such as, and then those are such as examples, and that's why you need the and at the end, because they've got a list. So if they'd bullet pointed them, you wouldn't have an and.
No, but it's the word requirement. And requirement to have a social, it's just a word that's slipped in there that makes it sound like it's necessary.
I can clarify, I think that's, the intention is with the social responsibility policy and a few of the other ones listed on the previous slide, the DLC should add them unless there's good reason not to. So there is no mandatory this is not mandatory for these to be added or a requirement of a licence.
Does that answer the...
Apologies, maybe I can add to that. So just reading that recommendation again, the DLC can implement a requirement through the discretionary conditions to have that social responsibility policy. So that's the intention of what that says there.
Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the wording where it says no alcohol advertising on the shop facade, excuse me, the word Liquor King, Liquor Land, Super Liquor, that's advertising, it's branding. So how are they going to cope with that?
So we say that they can keep their brand name and their logo, but this is targeted at all the specials and all the kind of price specials and advertising that they might have in front of the shop facade. So we can't make them change their name. Unfortunately, that's not something that we're able to do.
Unfortunately. Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair. Thank you, guys, again. I do have to say I'm a little bit concerned with the social responsibility policy part. As you've written there, detail on staff training. Well, staff need to be trained to get a manager certificate. When I apply for my licence as the business owner, unless the form's substantially changed, I have to convince the DLC that I have adequate staffing in place, including if someone goes home sick. Not serving minors, well, that's the law. I don't actually know that you need a policy to reinstate what the law is. Remote sale of alcohol, forgive me, but I understood that as the person who sold the alcohol or the business, I'm responsible to make sure that whoever the intended person is at the point of collection has to be of age and meet the requirements. So I'm a little bit confused why you want to put in something which the law already puts in a much stronger language.
So the law will and does cover some of these aspects. So this is just
I think it covers pretty much everything you've put there.
So in the draft policy that went alongside the consultation document, we had a detailed definition of what a social responsibility policy is. This is summarised there. There are more elements to the social responsibility policy which are not covered in this bit here. Essentially, a social responsibility policy puts the onus on a licensee to prove that they are going to be a responsible host and sell alcohol responsibly. So I take your points that these points here are already covered and might already be, a part of a process of becoming a duty manager, those sorts of things as well. But the social responsibility is much bigger than that and includes other things. And it allows the DLC to see that the applicant is a responsible host and RLC will provide a template if this is the chosen path.
Certainly, sure, and I take on board what you're trying to achieve and what your objective is, and including the DLC. I'm just concerned that if you put in too broad a paint structure, which you're asking me to vote for, and then it doesn't work, or there's issues, or we get knocked down by higher courts, ALA, etc. down the track, I've helped vote for that. And for me, I won't continue on because we're obviously at different loggerheads here, but I don't think it's specific enough to get my support. If I can move on to the SEPTID and CCTV, I think most owners of a premise would have cameras anyway, and would obviously they don't want to be the target of crime. So when you say, well, you have to have CCTV, whether it's outside or blah, 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 or you have to have the SEPTID, well, it's a matter of opinion, because I could say here's a design, you may disagree and someone else implements it, has a different set. I think some of this is getting, forgive me, a little bit too of illegal, because selling alcohol is not illegal. And I think we're getting a little bit too on this whole thing of you have to have this, you know, next thing we'll be saying you must be on a 4th story so that no one can jump out your window. I'm a little bit concerned that we're getting a little bit too broad, remembering this is a legal product. Obviously it has a big bearing when it's abused on harm in society, but I do have some concerns about just quite how we're going down the path where it's not specific for the DLC. Just putting that out there. Thank you.
If I may have the opportunity just to respond, I would just say that the DLC can only apply conditions which are fair and proportionate. So I think just to take that in mind when these optional conditions are being applied, it has to be a reasonable response to a premises, how they operate. Yeah.
Any further questions, Councillor Lee?
Just following on from that question, so if you can only act in a proportional way, how would it be resolved if one party thinks that it's not proportionate?
So ALA is the Alcohol Licensing Regulatory Authority. So when there are disputes of this nature that can't be resolved between the DLC and the applicant, then there is a sort of tribunal and a hearings process where these issues can be resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions then, councillors? I'll just get Rob to go back to the resolution. So I had proposed to move that it be option 2 with the additional discretionary conditions that may or may not be applied. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Wing. Don't know, I think we've covered this pretty much in questions, but remembering these are discretionary conditions and there are options for them to be challenged if need be, and I think the fair and reasonable comment that Alex has referred to says it all. So we're going to put this one now. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Anyone against? Sorry, I think that was carried. I'll just do the 4s against. I think I had. Your Worship, are you voting? Sorry, can't see the hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then those against? 5, so that is lost. So then I need a mover and a seconder that the Council adopts option 1, which is the status quo, that the current discretionary conditions are maintained, including SIPTED principles, and that the advertising of alcohol must not be more than 50% of the shop facade. That's been moved by Councillor Lee, seconded by Councillor Patterson. I'll now put that one to the vote. All those in favour, please signal aye. 5 against. Thank you, that one is carried.
Madam Chair, sorry, just double checking. That was 5 votes against. So that was a tie.
Oh, sorry. Hang on.
Okay, and I think it happened exactly the same way for the previous vote, actually, as well, because if my math is correct, that was 5-5.
We'll just recheck that, because the first time round there was it was lost. So Rob, can we just Mayor
Yes, I supported option 2 and I voted against option 1.
What have you captured? Sorry, I'll just check what Robert's captured. So on option 2, those that voted in favour, just please raise your hands again. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, sorry. I didn't count Tani. Sorry, I just need to stop for a governance check now because we've obviously got a little bit of a procedural defect here.
That's what happens when you're not here, Greg. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was.
Councillors, because the votes were incorrectly counted by me, sorry it's getting too late in the day and I didn't capture the vote from Her Worship, who is now just this tiny little image on screen instead of the big one that she was before. So given before, when I put that motion, option 2, it was 5-all based on those votes. As the Chair, I have the casting vote on that. And so given that I had moved that, then I would cast the vote again in favour of option 2. So that means that that is now carried. Apologies, councillors, that was just my error in counting, and so apologies for that. But in terms of the way the votes fell, it was 5-all, and as Chair I have a casting vote to exercise in that situation. So we'll move on now to the on licences. Councillor Brown, are you now exercising your stepping out of this discussion? So if we could just note, Councillor Brown has removed himself from the discussion for this topic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the on-licence proposals that we had put forward were trading hours and discretionary conditions. Our first proposal was around trading hours. The 4 options that we went out to the community with were the status quo, which is currently 1 a.m. outside the CBD and 3 a.m. close inside the inner city. Option 2, which was the preferred option chosen by yourselves to go out for consultation, was earlier closing times in the inner city to 2 a.m. with the remainder of 1 a.m. Around the rest of the community. Option 3 was a 1 a.m. close on Eat Street and a 2 a.m. close for the rest of the inner city, with option 4 an earlier close time of 1 a.m. across the whole city. So what we have seen there is that 75% agreed with Council's preferred option to reduce the hours to 2 a.m. And this would the theme that came through there is that this would reduce the social issues that occur at this time of night. 25% disagreed with the proposal. Some of these respondents actually preferred reducing hours further. Others wanted the hours to remain the same. So many of these respondents mentioned that it would reduce visitor appeal if these premises closed early. Happy to leave it there, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Your Worship, did you have a question?
Yes, a question. Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The question that I have is, if we were to stay with the status quo, is there a way for, I suppose, harsher punishment or penalties for the operators that are creating an unsafe environment on the premise, or that there is evidence that there is continuously an unsafe environment? The reason why I ask is one of the questions I've been really grappling with is, where would these people go if it was closed earlier? And right now they, as we've heard through feedback, they are on a premise that is managed, that has security, where they are being supervised, I suppose, in a way with their drinking. And I just am concerned about earlier closing time, meaning that we will just push the problem of people who will choose to continue to drink into the neighbourhoods where there's not that level of security or safety. So I just wonder
if it was to remain the same, would staff be satisfied with the
tools that are currently listed in the policy, or is there a way to demonstrate if it has become an unsafe premise, harsher penalties such as removing of licence, as an example? I just don't fully understand that. Thank you.
Do you want to try and answer that question, Greg?
So, in terms of your question, and harsher kind of conditions or punishments for premises that are non-compliant, it is possible. It's possible now with the DLC. So the DLC can impose stricter conditions. Will that solve the issue that we have now of alcohol harm in terms of, we saw the police data that alcohol harm is high at this time of night. We have the ED presentations due to alcohol, which also show that it's high at this time of night. If we don't change things, I'm not sure if the policy doesn't change, then I'm not sure necessarily things will improve with the DLC alone, because we currently have that mechanism now that we use, if that makes sense. So it's kind of sticking with the same. So there's no change that will necessarily mean that alcohol harm will reduce. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you for that answer, and I just have an additional question to that, if possible.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate that there has been evidence of the spike in harm at that later time or earlier time in the morning. Is there a clear link between that harm being caused from after, or on the premise of an on-licence, or are we not able to differentiate that?
So the police data that we've been sent spatially plots where the alcohol harm is occurring. So we can see that at this time of night the harm is occurring predominantly in the city centre, where most of these premises are open.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions to Alex, Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was in Stradbroke Island recently. It's a small holiday destination, not a huge one by any means, and they have signs on the walls that say banned from one, banned from all. That to me shows that they're putting the onus on the behaviour of the individual rather than punishing the premises. Can we look at something like that instead of just being the meanies who squash business and opportunity? Can we point the finger back at the idiots who are causing the problems and say, you do this once and you don't get in anywhere ever again? Can we do that?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Patterson. No, not that we're aware of at this stage, that we wouldn't be able to prohibit anybody from going into different premises across the city.
If the bars banded together and did that themselves, could they do that?
That is out of our control.
Councillor Barker? Oh.
Second question. I guess it follows on from Mayor Tapsell's line of questioning. Is there any evidence to prove that if we shifted back from 3 to 2, that the incidence of harm would not just shift out into the suburbs?
So that data isn't available to us. It's an unknown. We can only go off the data and the information that we've been provided from health and police, who recommend, they wanted a 1 a.m. close. They think this is going to be the solution to solve some of these issues that we're having at this time of night due to alcohol. So unfortunately I can't necessarily say whether it will, but I can say that the police would support a further reduction and believe that that will reduce the kind of pressure on them.
Thank you.
Councillor Barker?
Actually, I was going to ask a similar question to Councillor Patterson, but more, and Mayor Tapsell, more along the lines of, if we're going to bring the time back, are we just going to bring the trouble back? And correspondingly, not necessarily where it is, but if you bring the closing time forward, is it just going to bring behaviours forward as well? You know, it's not going to address the behaviours, it's just going to change the timing of them. That was my question, but you've answered that we don't have much data really on that. So, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Greg, and thank you for the mahi that you've done already. It's been a long process. This one for me, I think, is the one that I've been wrestling with and trying to do some, not so much research, but get more information and asking around. If depending on the way the vote goes and everything, I would be leaning towards supporting status quo. And I recall listening to the submitters that came forward, and one urged, one submitter with a good reputation. There are some good operators in Rotorua. I think of us as being, what are we doing for hosting our guests? We get a lot of people from overseas. Auckland, Queenstown, Rotorua, Taupo, I'm sure, would be thinking of their guests. So for me, this submitter has hosted many occasions where people come in, like we've had Rugby World Cup matches here, and they've hosted and right till early hours of the morning and pretty much well behaved. I'm more leaning towards still keeping this one at a 3 p.m. Not that I'll be there at all, but I think we being the city that we are.
Just in questions still. We're still in questions at this time. So I've just got a couple of questions. There seems to be some concern that if we shifted the closing hours earlier in the CBD, that will just shift the problem out to the suburbs. So how many licensed premises are there out in the suburbs, and do they have such long opening hour conditions anyway?
So outside the inner city, everywhere has to close at 1 a.m, so that's the current rules. So that's been in place since 2019, and I'm not entirely sure what the hours were previously. So in the suburbs, the closing time is 1 a.m. And in terms of the number of licences that are open in the city centre at 3 a.m, there are 26 possible licences that could stay open until that time, but in reality only a handful actually do, about 5 or so by our research.
Okay, second question just was the types of events that Councillor Maxwell's talking about. So if we were to bring it back to the earlier closing time, but there was something special like a Rugby World Cup, is there an opportunity for a venue to ask for an extension in those special circumstances?
Yes, yep, there is. So as part of the licensing process, there is a type of license called a special license that a premise can apply for. So this is essentially if they want to operate out of the hours that they currently have, so maybe for a birthday party, the Rugby World Cup, something like that. So yeah, very good point. So this premise, if they had to close at 2 a.m, on those special occasions where they wanted to host more people, and later they could do so until 3 a.m.
And just a reminder then, on the submissions that we got on this, there were a significant number that actually were in support of the earlier closing times?
75%.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Patterson and Councillor Lee?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I was just clarifying when I said push out into the suburbs, I didn't mean going to other bars. I meant just everybody cruising around to someone's house and causing mayhem.
I don't know if we can control what goes on in private people's houses, but anyway, Councillor Lee.
Then we get noise complaints, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You talked about troubles in the CBD, I guess. The bars that spring to my mind are Hennessy's and the Pig and Whistle and whatever, that sort of area. I guess that's what you were thinking. But, I mean, last time I went to Hennessy's, perhaps it was on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, they were closing up at about 10. So when you're talking about 2 o'clock in the morning, that would be relatively unusual that one of these bars would be actually open till 2 o'clock in the morning in reality, wouldn't it?
Yep, so through our research, we have estimated that about 4 or 5 bars are probably open at this time of night, and it's kind of just isolated to the Friday and Saturday, the weekend.
So, you know, we're promoting ourselves as a conference destination, and I can kind of imagine that after a 3 or 4 day conference on the last day, that some attendees want to go out. By the time they arrive in Hennessy's or the Pig or wherever, the bar owner might not be aware in advance that there was going to be this big conference in town, and the bar's rocking and it's rolling at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they'll be required to shut up shop at that time, huh? But under this arrangement, so they'd have to have a degree of foresight to be able to.
Question, Councillor Lee.
Well, I did say wouldn't it at the end of it? That sort of makes it a question, doesn't it? But yeah. So it would cause red tape, and foresight would be required by the bar owners, wouldn't it, to avoid having to shut up early on those rare occasions.
Yes, yeah. So if you wanted to host an occasion, so say if we went with the 2 a.m. close, the bar wanted to stay open longer than that, then yes, there would have to be some sort of foresight for why they're doing that and why they're applying for the application, and they'll need to consider the time frame it takes to process an application, which I think is 28 days. It might be 14 days, but it would be at least a couple of weeks for an application to be processed.
Thank you.
Okay, Your Worship, did you have another question? Your hand's still up or not?
Yes, and now I'm trying to frantically remember what it was. Sorry, are there any other questions?
Give you a minute to gather your thoughts. Any other questions, councillors? You thought of it?
Okay, I remembered.
Yes, Your Worship, what's the question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. My question is just regarding some of the concerns that have been raised that were supportive of the earlier closing time because of noise issues that were also occurring, which has been disruptive to
commercial accommodation providers,
and also residents living in a city.
If it was to remain status
quo, is there
further
any ability to ensure that any establishment that chooses to stay open late is not being consistently disruptive with noise? Because just as we are wishing to attract more visitors, and certainly the conferences and business events that have been mentioned, we also want to make sure that it's not disruptive, and noise control is also a key policy that we have and need to abide by under the Resource Management Act. Just wondering if there's a comment on that to exist of some of the concerns that were raised.
I think we're going to JP for this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, I'm looking across at Alex and Greg just to head me off if I say something inappropriate around the process. We have had a lot of noise complaints in the inner city around operations of bars. They predominantly are concentrated around Eat Street. So the examples being cited are sort of not where the majority of our noise complaints come from. If you start thinking about something like Eat Street, there is within short distance to the Pullman, to the Novotel, to the Regent, and a number of other apartment developments. And there has been expressions of concerns repeatedly by a number of residential properties in that vicinity. So again, Her Worship does touch on some of the reasoning why I think option 3 had been surfaced previously in the discussions and in the process. I'm not sure how many people have responded submission-wise, but again, that's one of the issues that does affect some of our accommodation and residential premises in the vicinity, particularly of Eat Street.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, councillors? If not, I need some. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps to JP. Isn't noise control quite a different issue with a whole different legal framework from liquor licensing?
Councillor, you are right, but one of the contributors here is obviously a liquor licence deals with noise emanating from a premise and the operation of a premise. Often the issues that are surfaced in our noise control and our complaints we receive are from people who have exited or exiting or waiting to enter a premise at particular hours. So that's kind of one of the issues around those hours of operation. It puts people either on the street or around the street at those times.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's the end of the questions on this one. So we have two options. One is status quo at 3 a.m. or option 2, which was the preferred one, which was to reduce to 2 a.m. in the inner city. So Councillor O'Brien has moved option 1. Is there a seconder for that, Councillor Patterson? So do you wish to speak to that, Councillor O'Brien?
Madam Chair, anything for my city. I have been doing research on this particular subject, much against what I want, but anything for my people and my town. I'm voting obviously for option 1. 3 a.m. How many actual places are open at 3 a.m. in this city? You'll be lucky if you can find one after 10 p.m. most nights. 3 a.m. closing time is used very rarely. Yes, I appreciate there can be a special licence, but that's assuming that it's fully staffed at the time and there's no complications. You know, many of these special licences can be held up and have been for, various reasons for many, many months. I have also a concern, and I brought this up to Alex when the first workshop happened. When we quote some of the evidence, it wasn't for me particularly detailed. Part of the thing was about checkpoints in various parts of the town. Well, sorry, if that's where the checkpoints are, that's where you're going to capture the people. It doesn't matter where they were drinking. They could be drinking anywhere. If the checkpoint's on Ford Road, let me tell you, you're going to pick up people on Ford Road at the checkpoint. When we talk about incidents in town, from what I recall, and I had a look through this last week through the workshop and watched it on our YouTube channel again, we didn't have any actual evidence presented as into how much alcohol was actually being consumed. I appreciate these incidents in the city. I have no problem with the data on that. But we all know that preloading is a massive problem for the youth because they can buy these booze drinks, especially the 7%ers, so much cheaper at off licences. Then they go into town because they only have about $50 left. That's for me now to blame all this all on people that are opening with no actual evidence that people are consuming or causing trouble in those premises and then being kicked out. I have a problem with that whole evidentiary package that was put in front of us because, again, it doesn't reflect what we all know as part of a massive part of the problem, which is preloading. So for me, the 3 a.m. is very rarely used. I don't see the portion, and as her worship brought up, there is, possible side effects of bringing it forward. For the noise factor, I would say, well, if we're that concerned, just say to the people on each street, no bands, no music after 1 a.m. Pretty simple solution, I would have thought. But, rather than changing all the hours and putting pressure on people when we are a tourist town, as submitted said to us. So for that reason, I'm sorry, I can't select the preferred option. I prefer to stay with the status quo. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson is a seconder. Do you wish to say anything at this time?
I'll reserve mine for the last, thanks.
Okay. Your Worship, you have your hand up. Did you wish to make a comment?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you. I've thought really long and hard about this, and I know there's been a substantial amount of reading through the submissions, but I also take on board and consider who were making the submissions, and I can appreciate that many of the people and organisations making the submissions would prefer that the hours would be reduced. I am also very mindful that there are many people in our community that didn't participate in this process, in particular a lot of young people as well. I've heard from operators of bars and restaurants as well who have also reminded us that they are not bad people, and that actually they provide a really safe space for people to be able to drink. And so when I take all of the feedback on board, I'm not able to support the reduction of hours, and I will also be supporting the status quo. I do appreciate that there are noise problems that come from it, but the community harm that's occurring, I am hesitant to believe that it is only because it is in the city, and I do have serious practical concerns that people who may be going into town to look for trouble, if in the odd occasion, if in the rare occasion that they do find themselves in the bar, because security generally do a really good job at protecting their patrons and the public. But I am concerned that the people who do choose to go into town and cause trouble, if it was reduced by hours, would simply only go back to their neighbourhoods and continue to participate in antisocial behaviour. So I do appreciate that we also have wider stakeholders such as people in the medical field at the hospital, and also the police that are having to deal with antisocial issues. But I think that there's a much better way to reduce that harm than by reducing the hours of really hard-working businesses that have actually been through significantly tough times. We've heard that not only in our own Rotorua Business Pulse survey, but also in the statistics when we look at the spend for both retail and dining and hospitality. And so I don't think that this is the appropriate time to be further reducing their business and their ability to make good earned money through providing a safe service. I do, however, note that I would like to see tougher penalties if some premises are seen to be negligent with their duties to ensure a safe environment, and I think that would be the best way to ensure that we are following not only the intentions of the local alcohol policy, but also what could be seen as a fair process as well. So I will be supporting option 1, status quo. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. So I've had 2 speakers speak in favour of this. I've got the seconder who has reserved the right of reply, so I will have 3 speakers in favour. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against this motion? If there's not, Councillor Patterson, do you want to just quickly take your right of reply?
Just a quick...
I'm conscious that you are wanting to go at 4.
Yes, thank you.
I'm conscious that I've still got quite a lot more decisions that I need to get through.
So, actually, Your Worship summed up quite a bit of what I was going to say, with the exception of we are currently looking at Rotorua becoming a vibrant city once again. We are working towards that. We know that events are a key part of what we do to get ourselves from where we are now, but up into that place that we want to be in the near future. We are working on upgrading our CBD and developing that, and we should not be putting the brakes on any potential developers coming into the city and looking at it and going, you know what, we could really build our nighttime economy in this city and make a good fist of it. Some sharp operators are out there. We would rather attract them here than see them turned off and go somewhere else. So definitely supporting option 1.
Okay, thank you. That has been moved and seconded. That is the status quo for those opening hours. So all those in favour, please signal aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. We're moving on now to the on-licence conditions. Councillor Brown, you're going to stay over there, aren't you? We're doing on-licence conditions still. So there are 2 options here. Beg you to speak to this just briefly, quickly.
Sure. So went out on this proposal with option 1 being the preferred, which was to leave it as it currently stands. So that's keep the current conditions. Conditions that may be applied by the DLC include one-way door restrictions, implementation of SIPTED principles, and host responsibility policies. Option 2 was to adopt additional discretionary conditions, and bearing from a previous proposal that we had raised, changing of the wording, which included host responsibility policy, maintenance of alcohol-related incidents books, signage on transport, and then some other consideration, discretionary conditions as well.
So the preferred option in this one is actually the status quo. Okay, any questions then around this? Are you, sorry, Councillor Wing? You're happy to move that? Councillor Lee, did you have a question, or are you signalling you're happy to move it? Okay.
So I was happy to move it.
If there are... Thank you. So there are no questions on this one. This is a status quo option. It's been moved by Councillor Wang that the current discretionary conditions are maintained. So I'm going to put that now. All those in favour, please signal aye. Against, thank you, that's carried. So, Councillor Brown, if you want to come back to the table, we'll move on to club licence conditions.
Thank you, Rob. So the next category that we did push out around the category of licences was around the club licence category, and we just brought a proposal forward on discretionary conditions. The preferred option was to keep it as it is, which is similar to what was on the licences. And then option 2 was to add additional discretionary conditions on top of that, which you have listed in your report, similar to what we had on the licences. I just wanted to reference, because Alex just reminded me that I missed this on the previous one. There was 73% agreed with the preferred option through the consultation process, with 27 who disagreed. Those that agreed said there were no strong themes that came through the actual submissions themselves. A lot of sporadic sort of commentary, but nothing that we could theme together. Those that disagreed cited said that club licenses should be treated the same as on licenses, and more conditions will reduce alcohol harm. So that came through the report.
Okay, thank you, Greg. That's a status quo one. I think and the submissions are in favour of that. Are there any questions on that? Otherwise, Councillor Waru has signalled that he is happy to move that. I had a signal here from Councillor Waru. I had a seconder from Councillor O'Brien. If there are no questions on this one, I'm going to put that one, option 1. All those in favour, please signal aye. Against, that's carried unanimously. Special licence conditions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the last category was around special licensing, and the proposal that was put forward around discretionary conditions was the preferred option was status quo, so keep it as it is, and then option 2 was to adopt additional discretionary conditions. Just noting that 78% agreed with Council's preferred option, which was to keep the status quo, and 22% preferred option 2. So there were no strong themes that came through in the commentary, in the qualitative theming of this.
Okay, I think this follows on from the previous one. So are there any questions? Councillor Wang signalled he's happy to move that, and seconded it by Councillor Lee. So if there are no further discussion, I think this one's fairly self-explanatory. I'll put option 1. Those in favour, please signal aye. Against? Thank you. Is it against? Sorry, I think that's carried unanimously then on that one. And lastly, Greg, we're on to the other feedback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through the process, as we do with all of our other consultation pieces of work, we provide an opportunity for anybody to raise anything else in the policy that they would like to raise for consideration. And one aspect that was raised was around the proximity to sensitive sites. The current status quo is 200 metres. Sorry, let me just go back. Currently, no new off licences are allowed outside the inner city within 200 metres of an education facility or marae. Within the inner city, there is no distance from that. So within the inner city, you can open up anywhere on the discretion of the DLC, but outside the inner city, it is at 200 metres. We've had a spectrum in some of the feedback that we got. So we did have the medical officer of health pushing for a greater distance. We've also had supermarkets pushing for less. So what we've brought forward for you today to consider is whether you would like to keep it the same, whether you would like to exempt supermarkets or grocery stores from sensitive site requirements, whether you want to exempt a premise that has a resource consent currently in train, or whether you would like to reduce the threshold or increase the threshold depending on where you want to go on that. I just want to also note that a previous decision that you have made has been a temporary freeze for 3 years with the exemption of supermarkets. So this would technically not impact off licenses outside the inner city for the next 3 years.
Okay, Greg, I just want to clarify this. So the off licenses can be, call them bottle stores and supermarkets. So are we suggesting that we have a differentiation between a supermarket compared to a bottle store?
We have put that up. Look, the Act, the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, actually does differentiate between grocery stores, supermarkets, and other off licenses, and amongst other definitions as well. We have put that up for consideration, but based on an earlier decision as well, I think you need to take into consideration that supermarkets would be exempt for the next 3 years for new off licenses as well, raising that.
So if we were to ring fence a map of Rotorua with, like we did with the speed limits, and we put all the schools and all the marae, we're likely to get overlapping circles. So it means that if there was a supermarket who would likely, either if they're in the CBD, that's fine, but if they're outside that, it means that they would need to be at least 200 metres or more away from any of those facilities. But as I understand it, if we were to map all of the circles on top of one another, there probably wouldn't be anywhere that a new supermarket could go if we went with the current status quo.
So that is quite difficult for us to map, and we have attempted it. But there will be concentrations across the city where there's a strong overlap. So you wouldn't be able to, in that sense, in certain pockets of the city.
So can I ask, if we did have a differentiation between a supermarket and a bottle store, we could potentially reduce the threshold for a supermarket because, well, they're not selling the hard alcohol, they're selling only wine and beer. Is that an option? Because up there it's talking about reducing a 200-metre threshold to a smaller one, but I'm suggesting a differentiation between a supermarket and just a normal off licence.
Yep, certainly that could be an option. So that would be an option of 2 and 4 presented up there. I think it's just worth noting what other councils do in this space as well. So in terms of the 200-metre distance, we're actually on the outer extremity of councils in this space. Most of them have 100 metres or 50 metres or, yeah, so it's much lower. And a lot of them already exempt supermarkets and or grocery stores in this space. So just kind of some wider context in this piece. But to directly answer your question, yes, we could do what you're proposing.
Okay, any other questions to Alex? Councillor Waru?
Tēnā koe te chairman, kia ora Alex again. Would this, I suppose, apply to existing premises or only new premises?
Only new premises.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, could I ask, so sorry, from the questions you just asked before, so in light of our first one where we said we've put the freeze on, could we just leave this till the next LAP in light of what the first decision was?
Well, that's a question that maybe the staff want to answer or not.
Yes, so option 1 is to just leave it as it is, status quo.
So just on that point, is there a problem because obviously if you're a supermarket there's a really long time frame to plan a site and, you know, look at all the demographics about where you would set up a new supermarket, that would actually be problematic for any future planning for a supermarket if they were looking at coming to town? If we were to just leave it for 3 years and they're not currently in the system?
Yes, possibly. You know, I think there's a couple of points in that. We can obviously review an LAP within the 6-year period, but we can review it at 3 years if we felt that had to happen. I think that's the first point I wanted to raise. The second point is that the DLC does still have discretion in this area across the LAP actually to consider the application on its merits, and so the DLC can still look at individual premise and the requirements thereof.
Okay, thank you. Your Worship, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I was just trying to find in the report, so I may have missed it, sorry, but I do recall some of the submitters, in particular the Rotorua Lakes Council, mentioning and requesting that Urupa be included in this. Just checking, was there a reason it wasn't, or did I miss that earlier? Sorry.
That Urupa is
cemeteries as sensitive sites.
So we didn't bring that back to council, that specific, I guess, mention. I think we've brought this particular topic back to council because of the kind of legitimate concern raised by two, I suppose, quite stakeholders that hold a lot of weight in this conversation. Not saying that the Rotorua Youth Council do not, but Urupa was mentioned by them, and that's a single, I suppose, respondent. And so this topic carries more weight, and we think probably should be presented in front of councillors. However, can consider alternatives and other factors to discuss.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I think this decision sort of overlaps the first decision, but I'm just also conscious that just need to make sure that we are not shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of future development and growth. So I'm just going to ask JP if he could just run us back over this, because from my questioning, I would either like to see an exemption for the supermarkets, or we do a reduction on 4. So either a 2 or a 4, and maybe JP, you could just kind of summarise where we're at with that.
Madam Chair, I think what I heard here was that we had submissions suggesting, so we were unusual in that we had no distance requirements within the inner city. So that's piece number 1. Our 200 metres distance from education and marae facilities is unusual when compared to some of the other ones, other LAPs around the country, which generally have a smaller distance, though we did have some submitters, or a submitter, Te Whataora or Toitiora, Public Health, who had asked us to actually extend that distance to a greater circumference, so from 200 to 400. So I suppose the question here, and it's possibly not specifying enough, is there's the question of directly exempting status quo because we see ourselves fitting within those bounds of some of the submissions we've received, or looking at our policy as being stronger with a 200 metre limit than other areas, or consider exempting supermarkets, or adjusting supermarkets and or all of the distances under option 4. So so that's potentially the change that's being talked about here.
So, Councillor Brown?
I'd like to move something if you were ready.
Okay, thank you. I'll just one final question then. So supermarkets and grocery stores are a specific category under the Act, so I can't become, if I'm a bottle store and I just decide to sell some chips and some eggs, become a grocery store. So we're talking about a specific category of supermarkets here.
Yep, correct.
Good. So, Councillor Brown, what are you proposing to signal as the mover?
I'm happy to move option 2 to keep it simple.
Okay. So we've got option 2, which has been signalled by Councillor Brown, which is exempt supermarkets and or grocery stores from sensitive site requirements. It's been seconded by Councillor Patterson. So,
I'll just ask a quick question, please, Madam Chair, if you would indulge me. Sure. Thank you. Just a quick question. So this exempt the supermarket, everything else would remain the same except for this. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in light of the option 2 being moved, so forgive me, the whole exercise of this, if I understand, is to reduce alcohol harm, or harm caused by alcohol, excess of alcohol. But we're okay stopping an off licence from opening up, but we're okay if alcohol harm is caused by a supermarket because the supermarket brings a few more jobs. Forgive me, I'm a little bit light, and we've brought this up before at the workshops about differentiating, and I get why Councillor Brown's doing this. It would be good to think, you know, they don't sell spirits in the way that a bottle store does, or off licence, sorry. But, you know, if we're talking about reducing alcohol harm, it sort of flies in the face on one hand to be saying, well, we want to reduce alcohol outlets, but if it's a supermarket, don't worry about it. I'm not quite sure how we're...
So I think it's been moved and seconded, so you can put your comments as against the motion if that's what you wish to do.
Well, no, I'm asking the question. The whole exercise is about reducing harm, is it not? So how are we reducing harm if we say you can't open X, but you can open up Y to sell alcohol?
I think it's about the responsible use of alcohol.
So you're saying bottle stores aren't responsible? That's pretty...
Well, I think we've had that moved and seconded. There is an option, a fallback option, which potentially could be we still have some kind of threshold. So I think what we need to do is test Councillor Brown's resolution. So we have now got that there. It's exempt supermarkets, all grocery stores from sensitive site requirements. As the mover, Councillor Brown, do you want to talk to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To address some of Councillor O'Brien's concerns, I have a firm belief that supermarkets will adhere to the rules way better than a liquor licence anywhere else. And I think we need supermarkets to increase competition in that space. I think that's really well communicated in national media around the lack of competition in the supermarket space. So it's a balancing act, I get that, but I think we've demonstrated that we're not looking to reduce alcohol harm, otherwise we would have changed the licence requirements for late night trading. So I think it's a balancing act. Personally, I think I'm supportive of supermarkets being close to schools. They will never sell alcohol to anyone under the age of 18. Won't happen. It's hard enough to get alcohol when you're 30 in a supermarket, you know, so I'm very confident that this would work. So,
thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Patterson is the seconder.
Again, I guess it comes back to the growth issue, and as Councillor Brown rightly pointed out, unless we get another supermarket chain in this country, we're going to have a duopoly, and we need a third, and they need somewhere to go. So we would rather have them come here than go somewhere else, so our people can buy cheaper food. And anyway, this is not going to be in place for 3 years, is that correct? With the earlier exemption?
Can I clarify that?
Exemptions.
Yeah.
Okay, Madam Chair. So based on option 1 that you had decided earlier today, you had exempted supermarkets from the temporary freeze. So this for supermarkets would be in place from day 1.
Thank you.
I'm happy to also support this. I think the proliferation of supermarkets isn't just going to happen overnight with a supermarket on every block. They're going to need a huge footprint. There'll be a smaller number of sites. We need to look at where the growth is in the community and not stifle that, so I'm happy to support that. If there's anyone that wishes to speak against this, I'm happy to take an against. So, Councillor O'Brien, you had spoken before against it. Do you wish to take this opportunity now?
Well, sorry, I think, accurately, I think I was just asking questions, but I take on board what you're saying. I suppose for me, my question would be then, so if we exempt it, we're removing the option of objections?
Past questions, but are you...
Well, if you've removed the...
Is there a quick answer to that, yes or no?
Yes, they're still able to object to a licence, but not on... Yes, as a person.
But not on these grounds.
Are you talking about the agencies or a member of the public?
Sorry, take your pick. Take your pick. Let's say I'm right.
The usual process will occur, yes. So objections can occur.
Thank you.
Given there seems to be a little bit of concern around this one, so Councillor Wilder, do you have a comment that you wish to make?
Just a very quick question. Sorry, I didn't realise we had finished question time.
We have well and truly finished questions, so...
So we're still going. Can I just ask one, please? The question was just out of the preferred option or status quo, what was the percentage? in the feedback? I can't recall.
Councillor Waru, this was not a proposal that was put forward on its own through the consultation piece. This was just something that has come through the themes of the...
No wonder I couldn't recall. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, if a supermarket wishes to open in our fair city, great. And if it just makes no sense at all to throw an obstacle in the way of that supermarket and say, you're the only supermarket in town that's not allowed to have alcohol in your shop. So I would certainly be supportive of option 2. I would even go so far as to move an amendment to throw option 4 into option 2 as well. But,
okay, well, what I'll do is I'll put option 2 first and we'll see how we go. So it's been moved and seconded to exempt supermarkets and grocery stores from sensitive site requirements. All those in favour, please signal aye. Against? Sorry, Your Worship, you voted in favour? So that is being carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you, Greg and Alex. There is just one final matter to deal with, which is the confidential minutes. There's no requirement to move into confidential if there are no corrections or amendments to those, so it's the confidential minutes.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, just before you finish, could I just ask, during our submissions, there was submissions on happy hours from at least several, sorry, from the top of my head, 3 submitters asking for at least, sorry, my own wording, regulating of happy hours, and I see that hasn't made it through, but, and obviously today's probably not the point for it, but maybe that's something we can consider for the 25th, I'm not sure, but...
Did you have a quick answer on that one, Greg, or not? Oh, okay, thank you. I'll take that as something that Greg can look at. So, if there are, it's the confidential minutes of the council meeting held on the 28th of May. If there are no amendments to those, can I have a mover and a seconder that they be confirmed as a true? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. Councillor Patterson, final closing karakia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and as is my practice, I will read the karakia in English. Restrictions are moved aside so the pathway is clear. To return to everyday activities, allied, enriched, unified and blessed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Declare the meeting closed at 4:10. Thank you very much, councillors.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.